Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this is going to be a debate about one world government. So I shall kick off in the traditional fashion. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this House believes in one world government. Let me first of all lay out a model. We propose that the United Nations form a worldwide government. Within that, of course, there'll be national governments, and we believe in subsidiarity, that decisions should be taken as close to the people as possible when that's apposite in relation to the policy area we're handling. We accept that countries can have different criminal laws, can have different laws about marriage or things like that, or different educational systems. We don't want to impose uniformity, but there are certain issues which are transnational and therefore have to be handled by the United Nations. So we would turn the General Assembly into a world parliament in which every country would be represented in accordance with its population. So obviously China, having the most people, would have the most representatives, and the Vatican City would have the fewest. But it would also be bicameral. We take into account the sovereign state nature of the members of the UN, and they'd all have one representative on another sort of assembly to reflect that. And obviously there would need to be elections in each country. Now this is an ideal to aim for. We might never get there. If we got even part of the way there, that would still be progress. Because of course certain countries like China are a one-party state. So they wouldn't have full representation in reflection of that. And the countries with the best records for free and fair elections, been doing it for centuries, someone like Sweden or Australia, they would have more representation per capita in view of that. And as the countries reach this democratic standard, their amount of representation would be increased. So it might have to be voluntary at first. We're not proposing to go to war to impose this on countries, and it might be on an ad hoc basis. We've had a continental government, more or less, the European Union, the African Union. In South Asia, there's the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. There's ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. There's Mercosur, as in for the South American countries, and so on. There's the Arab League. Some of these are overlapping. There's the Organization of American States. And so these would evolve into subunits of a world government. And we want to promote democracy and freedom around the world, freedom of expression. Obviously, you can set reasonable limits on that. What is a reasonable limit? That to some extent would be up to the nation state to decide. But we must have international law really enforced, not just there being something theoretical, because many problems do not recognize national frontiers. Environmental problems, health issues, and so on, no borders. Global warming is not going to stop at this imaginary line that we've drawn in the land or in the sea. So human rights are just that. Therefore, humans, all humans, regardless of citizenship, and so they should be upheld throughout the world. Abusers of human rights have always been able to cower behind national sovereignty, but no more. There must be equal justice, justice for all in all the world. And so we must put aside national chauvinism and this petty particularism, which has so prevented the expansion of liberty. We must emancipate people the world over. There are people who are bonded laborers. There are people who are in slavery, even where that's illegal. And this must be stopped. And we're not going to let something like national sovereignty get in the way of emancipating people. So we have fantastic human rights legislation, but unfortunately, at the moment, enforcement is ineffectual, and that's got to change. So we're all human, and that has got to be the underlying reason for world government. Race is only skin deep. Nationality, a passport, it's a piece of paper. We are all humans. We've got to look out for each other. We've got to help each other. No matter which language people speak, which religion they belong to, or no religion at all, we need to look out for each other, and we face common problems, so we have to work together. And that's the way things are going. That is the tide of history. We started with our bands of hunter-gatherers, and we spread it across the world, and we set up whatever tiny, petty clans and tribes, and these evolved into smaller countries, into larger countries, into empires, into whatever, political unions, and one world government. That is the end point that we're striving towards. Of course, we allow local identity to thrive. People have the fullest expression of their national or other identity, and we respect local particularities so long as these don't clash with human rights. Someone can't say, well, I'm going to abuse my child because according to my tradition that's acceptable. No, it's not. That wouldn't be allowed. So we would also protect ethnic and religious minorities wherever they are in the world. So it would work through the United Nations, and the Secretary General would be more or less a world president, and he or she would serve for a limited time. We're trying to extend rights across the globe. So the UN already tries to do peacekeeping. We'd eventually have a United Nations Army, a United Nations Navy and Air Force, and hopefully eventually take them away from nation states. So these could not be used for aggression or internal repression. So that is the model we've laid out to the world, and that's the way forward for humanity, for peace, for justice. You see the tremendous progress that the UN has done, the World Health Organization absolutely wiping out smallpox in the 70s, making so much progress against polio and so on, and UNICEF doing so much to spread literacy. Women have been empowered. So the United Nations has had many rip-roaring successes. We'd like to emulate this in other spheres and solve man's suffering forevermore. And for the foregoing reasons, I beg to propose. Well, I am going to put the case for the opposition. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we are against this harebrained scheme to introduce one world government. It's Orwellian. So we reject this totalitarian and neo-imperialist notion, doing it under the guise of human rights. And you notice there's always people from these erstwhile imperial powers who are harping on long and loud about human rights, despite coming from countries which have abused these most grievously. It's a farce. So the United Nations is supposed to be about respecting national sovereignty. And what we heard is a proposal for the precise opposite. Incidentally, UN member states are entitled to withdraw, and that's what a whole host of them will do if you try to force this scheme down their throats. How on earth is it going to work? Israel and Iran, how are they going to agree? Nice try. This is fanciful to say the least. Then there's some countries which don't even get to be UN member states. Take Palestine. And there's many member states which don't even control the whole of their own national territory. Take Transnistria, which is the Republic of Moldova. And why on earth would we give the UN any more power than it already wields, since it is so catastrophically incompetent at implementing policies in areas where it's been given power already? See how it's bungled things so disastrously. It is grossly negligent in many areas. It's terrible at executing its extant duties. So it would be absolutely lunatic to give it any more power than it's already got. Look at peacekeeping, where it has had a myriad disastrous failures, and millions of people have paid the price. And I mean millions. I say that without any exaggeration. Look at the Rwandan genocide, which the UN was supposed to stop. Or look at Srebrenica, where the blue helmets, they simply withdrew and let 10,000 Bosnian Muslims be butchered. And so much money goes missing out of UN accounts. There was endemic corruption under Kofi Annan, and the situation hasn't improved much. And powerful member states, the United Nations, for example, the United States, for example, often refuse to pay their dues. Well, it's hard to blame them, because it was just blown on these dinners for these fat cats, these 5-star humanitarians who were more interested in flying business class and staying in a fantastic hotel than they were in actually helping the needy. So we already know that the UN is a nest of vipers. It's just a place for espionage. And the UN is absolutely useless at preventing wars. You know, they intervened between India and Pakistan since 1947. Conflict still going on over 70 years later. They even authorize wars. They start wars, authorizing airstrikes on Libya, on Iraq, on Syria, and that's just in the last 10 years. Some humanitarianism, you know, you can follow their record across the world. Follow the trail of corpses, really. The tens of thousands of slaughtered people in Libya should be laid at the door of the UN General Assembly, because it was the UN that killed them. Now look at the UN Security Council, the permanent member states, France, the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia and China. Who are they? The Allies Club, the winners club from the First World War. Are we stuck in a time warp from 1945? This doesn't reflect geopolitical realities. So these are the erstwhile imperial powers from that bygone epoch. And okay, France and the UK were puissant back in the day, but in the modern era, that's absolutely not the case. Why on earth is India not there? India's permanent seat at the top table is long overdue. France and the UK, they need to really go the way of Nineveh and Tyre. If anything, turning into European Union seats shared between them, that might make sense, but not separate seats for the UK and France. So, well, what has the UN done? It's certainly been very active around the world, sexually abusing minors. The Blue Peacekeepers have been doing that on an international scale, failing to tackle piracy, failing to prevent famines, and the genocide in Darfur. So their record is absolutely cataclysmic. And then suddenly these tyrannies have the same power as democracies. You really think you're going to get China and North Korea to hold free and fair elections? You're having a laugh. The other speaker, well, he's got a sick sense of humour. And you can't push them too far. They'll simply leave, form with their own rival organisation. So there are these charade elections in so many member states. So we're never going to be able to make the transition there. So that's the choice, is you either have a quality membership of people who really uphold human rights, or else you have a membership for the whole world. If it's going to be united in the United Nations, then you have to accept despots too. And who are these people who are preaching about human rights? It's nauseating. They're the worst human rights abusers. Out of the kindness of their hearts, they have bombed, invaded, and subjugated dozens of countries. So it's preposterous. You see the torture that went on in Abu Ghraib, committed by the United States with the connivance of the UK. You see people held without trial or charge and tortured in Guantanamo Bay for 17 years by the United States, that were the ones who keep banging on about human rights. They always do this. Every war of aggression is predicated on so-called human rights. So before you know, they will invade every country for human rights. There really is no limit to their bloodlust. They are warmongers. So the worst human rights abusers shouldn't sit in judgment on the others. There have been attempts to extend the power of the United Nations with the International Criminal Court, which the United States won't sign up to, nor indeed will Russia. And as the United States, they are so jealously guarding their own national sovereignty, yet that they reserve the right to lecture to the others in this moral high tone. It's disgusting. It's part of this wider malaise of arrogance, ignorance, and toxicity that one sees in the United States and other erstwhile imperial powers. That's that. So the International Criminal Court, it's fine for America's enemies, but not Americans, because there might be politically motivated charges. But there are politically motivated charges against various former African leaders and leaders of the former Yugoslavia and so on, but that they get banged up. And why on earth should we listen to what Americans in particular say about human rights? Of all 193 countries in the world, which one was the last to outlaw the execution of children? Not Iran, not North Korea, not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The last country in the world to outlaw the execution of children was the United States. And that wasn't even Congress who did it. The Republican Party wanted to keep it. It was the Supreme Court imposed it. So there we are. There is something to be said for judicial activism. So no world government, it simply wouldn't work. It'd be some countries trying to bully others. They might try and disguise as world government, but it wouldn't be. We don't want them poking their nose into our affairs. There's one overarching human right, and that is national sovereignty. And I know nations are sometimes bad, but it can only go so badly because maybe one or two countries where things are disastrous. If we have one world government, we can have the worst possible government everywhere. They could raise taxes, they could be grossly incompetent because there would be nowhere else to go, because every other country will be following the same rules. If you don't like things now, you can vote with your feet, move somewhere else. But the United Nations would just impose a uniform chaos, oppression, and calamity. I beg to oppose.